Britain has an epic history, but within it there's a wealth of untold secrets still to uncover.
It's a really key find of the week.
So every year, hundreds of archaeologists set out, hunting for clues to solve the mystery of who we are and where we've come from.
Just found this amazing pendant.
Over the past year, their discoveries have been more exciting than ever. This series will explore the best of them.
Just found a coin. Oh, marvellous.
Brought to you from the field in a very special way.
Each excavation has been filmed for us as it happened by the archaeologists themselves.
It looks absolutely fantastic.
But he had a bad day when he never brought these back.
Their dig diaries mean that we can be there for every crucial moment of discovery.
Do we have a winner?
I know, I think it's stunning.
Incredible.
Our archaeologists will be joining us here in our special lab to take a closer look at their finds and to figure out what they really mean. This is so exciting. Welcome to Digging for Britain.
This time we're exploring dramatic discoveries from the west of Britain. We'll reveal how the invaders and outsiders of the past have shaped our world and give tantalising insights into the spiritual beliefs of our ancestors. We'll explore evidence of foreign pilgrims and strange rituals around Stonehenge.
It's an immediate link to the people that lived here.
A lost British city rediscovered after 700 years.
At least 100 buildings going up in flames all at once.
And the warrior invaders we now know were more than just legend. These discoveries are rewriting our history. To find out how, archaeologist Matt Williams and I have been given special access to Salisbury Museum. Its unique collection spans nearly 500,000 years of life on this island.
So these are all Anglo-Saxon grave goods.
This is absolutely beautiful.
This is the Warminster Jewel.
And we're going behind the scenes to the back rooms ordinary visitors don't get to see.
That is enormous. That is a shin bone or a tibia.
Less than 10 miles from Salisbury Museum is Stonehenge. 4,000 years ago, the spiritual beacon of Britain and Europe. Today, an enduring mystery that leaves us asking, who came to this vast monument and what did they do here? The answers may lie buried in the hills and valleys that surround Stonehenge.
Archaeologists have been interested in the landscape around Stonehenge for some 300 years, but now new technology has revealed hidden details in the landscape that haven't been seen before.
We've discovered Stonehenge didn't stand alone. It was one of a network of sacred monuments along the River Avon in Wiltshire, many of which have lain hidden for thousands of years. Since they've been identified, archaeologists have wondered what clues they might conceal.
At the end of the day, though, the only way to understand how all these monuments link together is to excavate them. And that's what a team from the University of Reading is doing.
They're digging just 10 miles from Stonehenge at Mardenhenge. A henge is a circular bank of earth, which we can still make out at Marden. Archaeologist Jim Leary is digging here, hunting for clues to explain the rituals our ancestors practiced in this landscape 4,000 years ago. 12 days into the dig, his team strikes it lucky. They've found the outline of a building right inside the henge.
Okay, rolling.
Okay, well, this is a very, very exciting moment because we have just uncovered our Neolithic building. You can see the edges of the chalk floor very clearly on this side. Some features showing up in the ground that have yet to be excavated. So what goodies await us underneath this section here?
The team's next job is to look for evidence of what kind of building it was. And on day 16, they make an intriguing discovery just outside its walls.
Here we have the remains of an external fire. This was a big bonfire and it's all emanating from one place, and it's created this huge spread of charcoal and ash and burnt stone.
The presence of burnt stone is puzzling. They're pieces of sarsen stone, a type of local rock, and clearly scorched. But it's not clear why anyone would put rocks on a fire. Then inside the building, they find a second hearth.
So one of the really key elements of the building is the huge hearth right in the middle. This is where there was significant amount of burning, so much so that it's discoloured the chalk into an orangey hue. But interestingly, there's no charcoal at all. I don't believe that this is an open flame fire.
Wood-burning fires produce charcoal, but there's no trace of any in this inner hearth. So if it wasn't a fire, what was the source of the heat that discoloured the ground inside the building?
So we have a little bit of a conundrum. But I think the key is the burnt sarsen stone that we're getting in the charcoal spread outside the building.
Jim has an extraordinary theory that these mysterious twin hearths reveal a ritual practised by our ancestors in the Stonehenge landscape.
I think what's happening are people are heating up the sarsen stones in the external fire, and that's the fire that we know is this open flame bonfire. And then I think they're picking up the hot stones, probably with 2 pieces of wood, and then they're carrying them into the building, and they're putting them in the central hearth and piling up these hot rocks. And then I think people are using the ledge around the edge to sit down, close the door, pour water on these hot rocks and create a sauna. And I think this building was being used as a sweat lodge.
It's an intriguing idea, and Jim has brought his finds into our lab so we can explore it further.
It's a really interesting site, Jim, and it's quite a persuasive hypothesis I think you've come up with.
Well, I think so. I mean, it might not be the answer, but it's the best solution that we can think of at the moment.
And we've got some of the sarsen stones here, Jim. These are the burnt stones, aren't they?
Yeah, so we're finding burnt stone within the external bonfire, the outside fire. And here we have some of those fragments, and they've been clearly heated up. They've changed to a sort of pinkish hue, fire cracked and broken.
So you've got the hearth outside where you're finding these burnt stones, the burnt area inside. Burnt stones don't make a sauna. What else have you found?
So the building itself is very well made. The surface is well prepared. There's a nice ledge around it, which just seems appropriate. The internal fire place, the internal hearth, is huge. I mean, it's utterly dominant. And I just cannot envisage other things going on inside this building. You wouldn't have room to live. So we need to focus on that hearth. That's our clue. That's our way into understanding the building.
Jim, a prehistoric sweat lodge, I mean, is there any precedence for that kind of thing?
It's not a crazy idea. And of course, if you look in the ethnographic record, it's replete with examples of sweat lodges. It's a fantastic way of purifying the body, of cleansing the self.
And although we'll never really know how it was used, if indeed it was a sweat lodge, it's very tempting to ascribe some kind of ritual, ceremonial purpose to it when it's in this landscape so close to Stonehenge.
That's right. We're in a landscape surrounded by temples. Stonehenge is a temple, Marden's a temple, Wilsford is a temple, Avebury, Silbury Hill, these are all ceremonial monuments.
This sweat lodge is brand new evidence of an intriguing ritual that may have taken place near Stonehenge. But who were these people, and where did they come from? Jim's team starts another dig at another henge, this one less than 3 miles away at Wilsford. And from day one, trench supervisor Rose is feeling confident she knows exactly where to look for clues. She's learnt from previous digs that the entranceways to henges can be the site of major discoveries. So that's where she puts her first trench.
So in this
terminus we hope to find the majority of finds. Normally you find very precious finds there because that's where they've dumped like ceremonial objects or whatnot. That's normally where all the good finds are found. So we're going to do a big slot in the end and hopefully we're going to find some wonderful things.
Just 3 weeks later, Rose is proved right when she makes a discovery more exciting than even she could have hoped for. A Neolithic burial. She calls Jim to come and see for himself.
Stunning. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely.
By the hands and yeah, I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Incredible.
Finding human remains within a henge is exceptionally rare, an incredibly powerful link to our ancestors.
So obviously what we have here is a crouched inhumation. Okay. This individual's lying on their right-hand side, legs pulled up, arms crossed over, basically a fetal position, and it's extraordinarily evocative. I mean, it reminds us that these monuments were constructed by and for real people. This was a real individual. They lived and they died. It just brings it really all to life when you see something like this. This person has been tenderly and carefully placed within the ditch. You know, so it's got some, it's really, really important and really, you know, just such a lovely discovery, just this immediate link to the people that lived here.
Jim knows a burial like this could tell us who worshipped in the sacred landscape around Stonehenge. And as Rose carefully excavates the skeleton, she finds an important but fragile clue.
So we have exposed and removed the rest of the body, and we're now left with the top 3 cervical vertebrae and the skull, and a tiny piece of the scapula left. What we're going to do is going to try and block lift it. The reason is because we have these tiny little amber beads coming up that are really fragile and they look quite crushed. So in order to keep all of that together, we're going to try and block lift it, wrap it in bandages and send it off to a specialist to be excavated properly.
Jim has brought the preserved bones back to our lab. As an osteologist myself, I'm thrilled to see this evidence. The fact this person was buried in the entrance to a henge shows they must have been significant. Now I want to know what else the skeleton can tell us.
We can see that his bones haven't quite fused fully, so he's still in the process of growing. You can see that the top of the humerus there is separate from the shaft, so we can get quite a good age in terms of his biological age. He's in his mid-teens, you know, around 15. How old is he in terms of his chronological age?
We'll be looking at somewhere between 2400 BC and 1800, roughly speaking.
The fragments of an earthenware cup in his grave show that this boy was one of the Beaker people, who may have come from the continent to settle in the landscape around Stonehenge 4,000 years ago. They were dazzling craftsmen, and Beaker burials often include valuable jewellery. This boy's grave was no different.
The only proper grave good from his grave was a beautiful amber necklace.
So this is them here, this degraded
That's
amber.
right, you can see the sort of orange amber coming through there.
Amber that might even have come from the Baltic, possibly.
Well, quite possibly, yeah.
It's a clue showing how Stonehenge and this network of sacred monuments drew pilgrims from across Europe.
The amber necklace, the way it's buried, very, very different to what went before. This is what you would expect from a Beaker burial. This is a new cultural group of people. And very different to what went before, which seems to be quite an insular culture. All of a sudden, we're getting very much an outward-looking group of people.
When they arrived here, the Beaker people transformed Britain with new skills and technology. To understand them better, Matt's examining Salisbury Museum's star exhibit, another extraordinary Beaker burial, known as the Amesbury Archer. He was discovered close to Stonehenge itself, and he was buried with an array of fine metalwork, like these golden hair wraps.
Well, he was also buried with some of the earliest copper objects that have been found in Britain. We have 3 copper knives and daggers found in the grave, and here is one of the daggers here.
The Beaker people transformed Britain by introducing metal. And these fine metal objects suggest that the Amesbury archer himself may have been a gifted metalworker, a skill completely unheard of in Britain until the arrival of the Beaker people.
And so this is just on the cusp of the Neolithic Bronze Age, so metalwork is just being introduced.
Well, that's right. It's a new technology that's just coming into this country at the time. So it is incredibly rare, and you have to imagine that when this was new, it would have been golden in colour, it would have gleamed, it would have been a very impressive, although very small, object. So this would have marked out the Amesbury archer as somebody important, owning really unusual objects like this.
So if he was just a visitor, do we know where he was coming from?
Well, that's the interesting point, is that we've done oxygen isotope analysis of his teeth, and we've been able to work out where he grew up, and we've discovered that he probably grew up in Central Europe, possibly in the Alps region. He's a foreigner, effectively, coming to this area, perhaps spreading this new information about metalworking.
This immigrant to Britain had travelled across the continent to get here. Stonehenge may have been the reason why.
Stonehenge at the time, when he was alive, about sort of 2,500 BC, was a temple. And many people would have been visiting this area to perform ceremonies and visit ceremonies taking place there. Perhaps he wanted to meet those people. Perhaps he wanted to share this almost magical understanding he had of metalworking technology with these people.
So he's come hundreds of miles with this incredible new technology, which must have astounded the locals or the people visiting Stonehenge. It's no wonder he was given such an incredible burial.
That's right. Buried with over 100 objects is absolutely exceptional for this period.
Together with the Amesbury archer, the new discovery of the Marden boy shows us more clearly than ever how the power of Stonehenge pulled in pilgrims from across Europe. 4,000 years ago, in this ritual landscape, people were purifying their bodies, visiting the temples and burying their dead. And the incomers from Europe brought metalworking technology to Britain, propelling us out of the Stone Age and into the Bronze Age. At Winterbourne Kingston in Dorset, a team from Bournemouth University has also been investigating evidence of religious rituals, this time from the Iron Age, around 2,000 years ago. What they've unearthed is eye-opening and very strange.
They've discovered extraordinary new evidence, bizarre animal burials pointing to very odd beliefs and rituals, and they had their cameras rolling right from the start.
A geophysical survey of the area had revealed an array of dark markings in the landscape. As the team excavated these, they uncovered the remains of a settlement over 2,000 years old, which included a number of massive storage pits.
Okay, well, I'm in the base of one of these cylindrical Iron Age storage pits. You can see it's fantastic, well cut, nice flat bottom base to it. We've got absolutely no idea what they were storing in these originally, although we presume it to be grain, that there's some kind of grain silo for storing grain over winter.
The grain pits are vivid evidence of a thriving Iron Age settlement. Then, at the beginning of week 4 of the excavation, they find something very unusual.
Where Alicia, Zach and Emily are excavating here, we've got what appears to be the remains of 3 sets of pigs.
Very strangely, the pigs have not been butchered. They have been placed in the pits whole.
This is a real dramatic wastage of animals. These are good, viable animals, good lot of meat on them, but they've been deliberately killed and placed in these pits.
But if the animals weren't killed to be eaten, then what is going on?
Now, we presume they've been sacrificed as a deliberate kill, but these are offerings for some kind of god of the underworld, for some kind of god probably to assume the continual protection of the herd or the community.
But this possible evidence of sacrifice is just the beginning. In week 5, the team discovers even stranger practices.
Yeah, we've got a front leg. Yeah. That other front leg. Yeah, and there's a bit of humerus here as well.
It's the remains of a sheep, but it has a cow's head placed on its hindquarters.
So it's kind of like this.
The discovery is unprecedented. By day 22, the team has discovered even more burials of these strange, man-made beasts. Nothing quite like this has ever been discovered in Britain.
Right at the very bottom of the pit, we're getting a whole series of specially placed deposits. And what we can see in this particular example, we've got part of a horse's leg here, partially articulated, and a cow's rib. And what we're finding in a number of these pits is there's a sort of almost like a hybrid animal of cow and horse. Where you find a horse's skull, it's always with a cow's jaw. Sometimes you find a horse's head with a cow's body. They're mixing and matching the two animals. Obviously both animals are important to them for different reasons.
So incredibly, it looks like our Iron Age ancestors were creating hybrid beasts from the body parts of animals sacrificed to their gods. It sounds unbelievable, but Miles has brought the bones to the studio so we can see the evidence with our own eyes.
Miles, this site just gets more and more interesting, doesn't it? This isn't just rubbish. They're not filling them in with discarded remains of butchered animals.
No, the one thing actually we're not getting in any part of the site is normal rubbish material, not sort of discarded waste. This isn't disordered dumps of material. There is a very specific order going on here. But when we're finding horse and cow, they're cut up. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be able to cram a whole horse into one of these pits in a complete state, but they're cut up and they're being placed with other body parts. So it's a rather sort of macabre jigsaw puzzle.
And that's what you've got here, is it? That's a cow, I assume, because of the horns, and the horse?
Yes. In fact, one of the storage pits, when we found it, it was actually sort of resting sort of the cow skull on top there. So it's creating this rather bizarre hybrid animal.
Like a chimera, a mixture of different animals.
Could say that, yes. Yeah. Yes, it is a direct attempt to create something that doesn't exist in nature, where they are dismantling or dismembering animals and then reassembling them whilst they're still fleshed and bloody.
And there don't seem to be any cut marks on these bones at all. They seem to be pretty intact. I mean, you'd expect to see cut marks here where muscle had been taken away, meat had been taken away from the cheek, and then perhaps cut marks on the inside here where the tongue had been taken out, but we can't see any evidence of that.
No, exactly. In most of them, we're not finding any kind of evidence that meat's been removed, or indeed that the bones have been broken up to get at the marrow. And we're getting quite big sections of animal in there all together. So perhaps there is a way of, by reassembling in there, you are creating almost like a deity, or you're creating a deposit that the gods would accept, which would ensure the long-term survival of your community.
By next year, Miles may have even more answers. But for now, it certainly looks like his team have discovered a new Iron Age religious phenomenon that had been entirely forgotten about for over 2,000 years. Our next dig diary features another staggering find, this time an entire city that disappeared for 7 centuries in Monmouthshire in Wales.
10 years ago, an archaeologist developed a hunch that a pretty little village on the Welsh-English border had a forgotten past, that it did in fact lie right at the heart of the English struggle for dominance over the Welsh in the 1200s. One particular field was crucial to his idea, so he gathered up his life savings, bought the field, and started digging. That archaeologist was Stuart Wilson, and this year he's kept us a dig diary.
Today, this sleepy village is home to around 3,000 people, but if Stuart is right, then 800 years ago, this was a very different place. Evidence is being unearthed outside the village in what is now Stuart's very own field. It was here that his hunch came good, when he discovered an entire medieval high street in the middle of nowhere. Could this be the medieval city of Trelech, the centre of power and industry that was lost in the 14th century, and for which archaeologists have been searching for generations?
Well, here we have a series of workshops in medieval times. And what we have down is iron slag floor surface with stone-lined drains and a nice central fireplace in the middle. So you could have walked up along here with your horse, with your dagger or bits of armour, come in here into a hard-working surface where the metalworkers repair whatever you're coming in with, right next to the main road in medieval times.
The remains date back to the 1200s. The sheer scale makes it clear that this was just part of a huge settlement. And as the dig continues, Stuart's team begin to turn up clues as to what made this town grow.
So one of the things that we find consistently in each and every trench that we dig is this stuff. It's iron slag.
These nuggets are the byproducts of smelting iron, and the town produced so much of it, they started using the slag as building material in floors and on their roads. Iron production on this scale indicates that Trellick was a major centre of trade and industry. And Stuart's team has found evidence that this was no ordinary place.
We do have a lot of indications here that the people who lived there were extremely wealthy. And we've got a couple of very nice finds from previous excavations that really show the wealth of these people. The first is probably this medieval flower pot. We could really say it's a unique piece because it's the only medieval flower pot that has ever been found in Wales. Another piece that we have is this one. Most people that see it think it's some sort of a dish that comes out of the kitchen, but actually this will be on top of your roof. This is a medieval finial. So it's a very high quality glaze on there. It's a very, very expensive object. It would have a large ceramic spike on top of it. So if lightning would strike, this would break and your roof would still be intact. Now, showing to the people of your village that you can actually afford to break an object like this really shows great wealth.
For Stuart, the evidence of affluence at the site confirms that he has indeed discovered the lost town of Trellick. This was no small Welsh settlement, but a vast English military supply base. Now, he's also uncovered remarkable evidence that its great wealth could have made it a target for attack by rebel Welsh, who may even have attempted to burn the place down.
The buildings we found were quite interesting because the buildings had actually been burnt down in a very, very severe house fire. We had glass actually formed out of the thatch, which has actually melted in the fire, and we found the mica on the stone had actually melted and glazed on the stone itself. So a very, very severe fire. We think of a great attack on the town in about 1295, 1296 by the Welsh. Yeah, so it looks exactly the same.
Not only is it possible that this English-run town was once burned down by the Welsh, Stuart is also finding compelling clues that the Welsh posed a constant threat.
Well, here we have a massive round tower, which looks like a good fortification to the manor house, but also to the town. Now, it's a really nice stone construction. It's got a single stone wall about 1 metre thick, and then an iron slag core to it, an inner stone wall, and all built up in one nice circle, rising upwards. Now, we think it's defensive because of its sheer size, the way it's been built. It's very well constructed.
In fact, it's not just how this tower was built, but where that indicates its purpose was defence.
If this stood up quite nice and high, it would see across the gardens of the neighbouring burgages, both along this road and along Tinkers Lane, and across the entire common fields.
Stuart is convinced that the round tower's construction shows just how solid Trellick's defences needed to be in order to see off Welsh aggression. But a big question still remains. Why did this 700-year-old town just disappear?
I'm still intrigued by how you actually came across this to begin with, Stuart.
Yeah.
Given that other people have been looking for Trellick for a long time, how did you put all the clues together?
You're never going to discover an elephant by looking through a microscope because you're looking too closely at it. You need to stand back. And when you stand back and actually look at the landscape, it's speaking to you.
Now, you've got a map here. Shall we
Yes.
have a look at that? Does that give us any clues?
Yes, it does. These maps are extremely useful.
So when does this date from?
This actual map dates from 1881. And what we have are thin fields here, following the main roads, and more thin fields. And the thin fields carry all the way down to the south, with large fields behind. Why are these fields like they are?
They're all man-made, they must have been here for a reason. And when you then compare it to medieval towns and then say, well, let's take the buildings out, and what do we get? We get this pattern. The thin fields are where the buildings used to be.
Right.
And they then back onto large fields, which are the common fields.
Okay.
Exactly what we've got here.
So the buildings would have essentially lined up in the plots along here, and these lines here form the back of the building
Exactly,
plots.
yes.
So you knew from the documentary evidence, for instance, you had an indication of the size of
Yes.
it in terms of numbers of houses?
We knew there were 378 taxable buildings in 1288. Now that is massive. I mean, it's even bigger than Cardiff at the time. So we're talking a really, really big town.
But I can recognise one thing over there, that's iron slag,
Yes.
is it? And that's a product of what made this town so rich?
Oh, yes. Now this, it's iron slag. Now they use this as hard core. And so by recording how much we get off this every so often, we can actually then start recording up how industrialised the town was. But that will take decades of work. At the moment, we've only got a very, very small sample.
Why is it forgotten? Why did it disappear?
Yes, the Welsh rebelled, but basically they had been defeated. So the military reason for it being here has gone. Combined with that, 1314 had to be the first year of 5 very severe weathers in this country, which caused a great famine. That precipitates a big economic depression. That means the civilian market for iron reduces. Then the economy goes, then the population goes, then it gets hit by the second wave of plague. Then you've got civil war at the end of the century. So within a century, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong.
Trelech was left without a purpose. Gradually, the people left, and this great medieval hub withered and died.
So how many more fields are you going to buy then, Stuart? Where are you looking there?
That one there looks pretty good.
Yeah, I reckon this one here.
If there's one field I would really like, it would be 121, just here. If you ever go up there, you can see where the ground just slopes off, clearly a building just under the ground. And if I was going to build an important building in a town, that's exactly where I would build it. So that's where I would like to dig.
How long are you going to spend excavating medieval Trelech, do you think?
All my life. I was hoping to do my field in 70 years. Now, I've only done 10 years so far, and the 70 years hasn't reduced because it's only increasing. So it'll probably take me another 100 years to do the field. So unless I live for an extremely long period of time, then it's going to take me longer than my lifetime.
Our successors will all be here discussing still medieval Trelech on a dim, distant version of Digging for Britain.
Yes.
32.
Yes.
Next year, Stuart is sure to have even more revelations about life in the lost medieval boomtown of Trelech. This work highlights the real power of archaeology to bring to life stories that are only hinted at in the written record. Archaeology and geology come together to reveal what happened in Britain at the peak of the last ice age. By around 30,000 BC, the advancing ice had driven humans and wildlife out, leaving Britain a deserted, frozen wasteland for 10,000 years. But as the climate warmed, a new wave of humans arrived from continental Europe to recolonise Britain. The first colonisers were Stone Age hunter-gatherers arriving in small bands, following herds of game across the land bridge from the continent. Because the population was small and mobile, it's very rare to find archaeological evidence of them. But a team of archaeologists in Jersey has been making some extraordinary discoveries. In 2011, Digging for Britain was there when a team from the Ice Age Island project discovered signs of significant human activity. Flint tools that suggested a large Stone Age hunting camp was nearby. It's amazing to be finding these little traces of them, isn't it?
It's very exciting just because it is so old, and it's really nice to be the first person for 14,000 years to be touching these tools.
This was a promising start, but the next 4 years proved frustrating. Lots of scattered flint. By 2015, still no direct evidence of a campsite.
We're yet to hit an archaeologically significant sediment.
The Holy Grail would be objects that have remained in situ, undisturbed by the passing millennia. The problem is, the site is on a gentle slope. Over the last 15,000 years, the ground has shifted downhill, in a slow-motion landslide. This destructive slide would destroy any precious evidence of a campsite. But finally, halfway through the dig, things start to look more promising.
This flat ground here really provides the last opportunity to find a significant area of in situ or well-preserved archaeology. So we're at the tipping point in the geology as well. So it's a really exciting position to be at.
On day 14, the team makes a significant breakthrough.
But this is a flint over here, and it seems like it. There's two pieces which were originally part of the same core.
If Jeroen's right, and these stick back together, then we're starting to see a part of the site we really haven't seen before, where everything is a lot more intact.
It suggests that this area hasn't been disturbed by the slow landslide, giving the team a fighting chance of finding an actual campsite.
The artefacts aren't all at crazy angles, they're relatively flat and they're relatively larger. That will tell us a hell of a lot more about what the people are doing here, how people are working at the site, and it may be pointing to really good high-resolution archaeology.
That would be good. We found some really fragile pieces of what looked like burnt bone. So it's this particular darker band that seems to be packed full of goodies. It's the first evidence of organics we've had on the site, and it's really quite exciting.
Could this mean that the team has hit the jackpot and that these are the leftovers of an Ice Age barbecue? Nearby, something absolutely extraordinary has turned up, evidence that this is much more than just a temporary camp.
One of the new things about this year is we're getting all of this granite material, big, large blocks of granite. I mean, is this natural or is there any human impact here?
If we look close at this big stone, you can see that actually it's fragmented in several places.
It's actually broken there in situ.
Absolutely, yeah.
The team believes this may have been a man-made paved surface. It's incredible. Nothing like this has ever been found in Britain before. It means that this could have been a semi-permanent settlement, used by some of the first European tribes to colonise Britain after the Ice Age.
Matt, this site just gets more and more exciting, and you've certainly scaled up your excavations this year as well. So rather than stones just moving around and having ended up in those places, you think they're actually lying where they were dropped?
Yeah, the geology is looking different. It's looking as if we've got actually an intact land surface there, and yeah, we're not finding things at crazy angles, higgledy-piggledy, or in these little mud flows. We're finding things in a spread, nice and flat, behaving themselves finally.
And some of the evidence for that is this amazing paving stones or paving slab. I mean, what do you think that's all about?
Okay, what we've got at the moment are big granite slabs, very close together, sometimes tessellating, sometimes lying over each other. We've never found these big blocks before within otherwise very sandy, silty and clayey deposits. So there needs to be an explanation for how they got there. And at the moment, humans bringing them in, placing them there is our best explanation.
So what do you think these stones were used for then? Are they something to stand on, to sit on, or perhaps even to cook on?
I just don't think we can say at the minute. We've only clipped the very edge of the preserved site. These sorts of pavements aren't unknown from other Magdalenian sites across Europe.
Hang on,
so,
when you say Magdalenian, what age are you talking about? What do you mean?
Magdalenian is the term for the stone tool technology, and these are the representatives of the modern humans at the end of the coldest part of the last ice age, who end up moving out all the way across Europe, across into Germany, and ultimately into Britain as well.
So this is a hunter-gatherer camp that you've uncovered?
I think we can be quite confident in that, yeah.
Finally locating this camp is a triumph for the Ice Age Island project. The archaeologists have given us a rare and direct connection back to the first humans who came here after the Ice Age and began to build the Britain we know. The next dig diary tells the story of another group of incomers who transformed this island. Warrior invaders who stormed into Britain in the 5th century AD. They were the Anglo-Saxons. They gave us our language, our laws, and the beginnings of our modern culture. but they left us little written record of theirs. Now, one of Britain's greatest treasure hoards could at last shine a light on this race of warriors.
In 2009, the discovery of the Staffordshire hoard astounded the world.
It's the biggest haul of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver ever found.
It's absolutely astonishing. I never, ever in my career thought I would be holding this kind of treasure. It's just incredible, unbelievable.
The hoard was found near Lichfield, once the heart of the powerful Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia, where it was buried around 675 AD.
Now, 6 years of meticulous conservation and research have revealed a picture of the people who owned these unique weapons, bringing to life a band of elite warriors once thought to be only the stuff of legend. The conservators have sent us their lab diary.
According to the famous Old English poem Beowulf, the Anglo-Saxon invaders were aristocrats adorned with gold. But with no hard evidence, experts assumed this was just legend and that the Anglo-Saxons were simpler warrior farmers. Now, this incredible hoard of silver, gold and garnets could prove the Beowulf legend is at least partly true. But first, they need to clean it.
Today I'm working on an object from the Staffordshire hoard. This is a hilt collar and it's made from gold and garnets. I'm cleaning the object to remove the soil from all of the cells. I'm using a solvent and that softens the soil. And then I'm using this thorn to pick out the soil once it's softened. The thorn's really good because it's quite soft so it doesn't scratch the surface of the gold.
Now the conservators need to piece together the nearly 4,000 fragments to make complete weapons.
So here I've got a very fragmented hilt guard. It's a very elaborate hilt guard assemblage in the sense that it has a lot of decorative panels and decoration along the side of it. Because it's so fragile in so many parts, I've had to make a custom-made mount which then appropriately allows it to be shown as it should be shown with the panels on the side. So in the future it can be displayed in all its glory.
Restoring this will take thousands of hours. The priceless materials are as incredible as the craftsmanship.
You can see in each of the individual cells is a individually cut garnet that's been cut exactly to fit into these unique cells.
The gold was imported from Europe and the garnets from India. Proof that the Anglo-Saxons created a wealthy, sophisticated British aristocracy that was not just the stuff of legend.
This is a very elaborate piece with very finely crafted decoration, and this particular item would have been a pommel for the top of the end of a sword. It has a piece of every single type of material that you would find in Staffordshire hoard, and obviously it shows that this person has been of a high ranking to have this as part of his weapon.
Conservation work has already shown that there were over 100 weapons in this hoard, each one owned by an individual aristocratic warrior. We had no idea that this Anglo-Saxon aristocracy was so big or so rich. The final step in the hunt for new information is to create a replica sword.
And here we have it. The replica sword is absolutely beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
This is the long-bladed sword of the period. It's a slashing overarm weapon, quite a clumsy weapon, not for duelling. And it's here with its replica gold mounts at the end, based on examples that we have found in the hoard.
Yeah, so this is the gold work here that we can see kind of replicated here. And the very end, the kind of the pommel, that's what this is based on, isn't it?
That's right. That is a exact copy of that pommel.
Yeah.
Were they ever used in war?
I mean, certainly you can do a lot of damage with a blade like this. Across the hundreds of fittings on these weapons is we are seeing degrees of wear, and where we find the most worn down parts is on the top of the pommel. It's possibly to do with a warrior having his hand rested perhaps on the pommel, but interestingly In contrast, where we don't find the wear is on the grip. And if these weapons were frequently being drawn and frequently being wielded, we might expect to see much more wear on the grips than we do. Maybe it is a case that these weapons were also to be appreciated at an intimate level in the feasting hall, probably between warriors.
The nature of this hoard and I suppose the very numerous artefacts that are contained within it, as you say, mean that we're having to rethink what we know about the structure of society at the time, because there were many more people, obviously, carrying around this kind of superior weapon than we'd thought in the past.
Yeah, I mean, this changes the whole landscape of looking at the warrior in Anglo-Saxon England. I mean, clearly there were swords of this calibre with this level of decoration in much wider circulation than we appreciated.
So was this Beowulf and his warriors?
The sword that Beowulf the hero uses to actually kill Grendel's mother is actually described as having had a hilt wrapped with gold, potentially with wire ornament. It could well have been a sword very like this.
The Staffordshire hoard paints a new and vivid picture of the powerful Anglo-Saxon warriors who ruled Britain in the 7th century. But what was their relationship with the Britons they lived alongside? Salisbury Museum holds the remains of the Anglo-Saxon Ford warrior, and I'm getting to see him face to face. Reassessing the objects from his grave in the light of the hoard will fill in more details in this picture of Anglo-Saxon Britain.
Adrian, I can't get over how well preserved absolutely everything is from this grave.
Yes, I mean, this is the burial of the Ford warrior, as we call him, who was found just to the north of Salisbury in the 1960s in an Anglo-Saxon burial mound. And yeah, he's buried with all the trappings of somebody who was clearly going off into the afterlife to fight.
The Ford warrior was buried with a long knife, a scabbard, spearheads, and this the boss from a huge shield. Typical grave goods for an Anglo-Saxon warrior. But other objects in his grave give a more subtle insight into how these invaders integrated with life in Britain.
We've got this hanging bowl here, which was, when it was discovered, was found to contain crab apples and onions.
Really?
Yes.
So a meal to take to the afterlife.
But these are interesting objects because although what we see here are very typical Anglo-Saxon items, this thing here is a more indigenous, native, British object. So you have here a combination of influences. You've got a predominantly Anglo-Saxon influence, but then also this item here is something that was used by local people as well.
So this is fascinating, isn't it? Because we are moving away from the old simplistic idea of this invasion of Anglo-Saxons coming into Britain and wiping out everybody and replacing them, towards an idea where you have a smaller influx of people, assimilation and cultures blending a lot more.
The Staffordshire hoard has thrown a new bright light on the Ford warrior. Together, they reveal the true size and wealth of one of Britain's earliest aristocracies. Invading warriors who blended their culture with that of the indigenous Britons, laying a foundation for the language and legal system we use today. These Anglo-Saxons were just one of a wealth of people who came here from Europe and helped to build Britain. Our island story is rich and complex. But from Ice Age caves to Stonehenge, forgotten Iron Age rituals to lost medieval cities, archaeology brings us closer to understanding how our ancestors made us who we are today. Britain has an epic history, but within it, there's a wealth of untold secrets still to uncover.
It's a really key find of the week.
So every year, hundreds of archaeologists set out hunting for clues to solve the mystery of who we are and where we've come from.
We've just found this amazing pendant.
Over the past year, their discoveries have been more exciting than ever. This series will explore the best of them.
Just found a coin. Oh, marvellous.
Brought to you from the field in a very special way.
Each excavation has been filmed for us as it happened by the archaeologists themselves.
It looks absolutely fantastic.
But he had a bad day when he never brought these back.
Their dig diaries mean that we can be there for every crucial moment of discovery.
Oh, wow! Oh, do we have a winner here?
No, I think it's stunning.
Incredible.
Our archaeologists will be joining us here in our special lab to take a closer look at their finds and to figure out what they really mean. This is so exciting. Welcome to Digging for Britain.
In this programme, we're joining teams of archaeologists across the east of Britain to share in their biggest new finds. We're there for the grim discovery at a crossrail site that reveals the brutality of Roman rule in Britain.
If they show signs of injury, then these are beheading victims.
We dive deep in the Thames, searching for clues to explain a mysterious naval tragedy.
It was really amazing, actually, that that's been under the water for 350 years.
And we explore a British story in Belgium, as a team reveals the secret advantage that helped Wellington snatch victory at Waterloo.
What you have here is basically a hollow ball, packed with gunpowder.
To understand how these discoveries and more fit into the story of Britain, archaeologist Matt Williams and I have been given special access to the Museum of London. Its unique collection tells the story of the East from this area's earliest inhabitants.
So these are people beginning to settle in the landscape around London.
The first Londoners.
And we'll get to see parts of the museum the public rarely get access to.
There are 20,000 skeletons down here.
Our first dig diary is not from Britain, it's from Belgium, but it explores a very British story, Wellington's victory at Waterloo.
In 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte faced the Duke of Wellington and his European allies at Waterloo. Wellington's victory ended Napoleon's rule and settled the fate of modern Europe. 200 years later, an international team of archaeologists travelled to Waterloo to excavate the battlefield for the first time, hoping to understand how one farmyard had become pivotal to the outcome of the battle and how the Allied army successfully defended that farmyard against the odds.
According to Wellington, Waterloo was the nearest run thing you ever saw in your life. We know that his victory hinged on finding a way to get ammunition to his outnumbered troops stationed here at Hougoumont Farm. But we don't have proof for how he did it. Now, archaeologists from Waterloo Uncovered are searching for clues and for evidence of the French onslaught fought off by Wellington's men.
We've been working down in this stubble field for the past 3 days, and that was an area that at the time of the battle was occupied by a wood. The French did advance up through that wood, and that fight within the wood is not fully understood. There are some eyewitness accounts, but it's fairly vague.
We know Wellington's men occupied the farm, and now for the first time we can understand how fiercely they had to defend it, as the team's investigations reveal the intensity of Napoleon's opening attack.
This tree faces onto an open area where we know there was a lot of fighting. There'd have been shooting coming from the wall over there, 40 yards away. So either way, these trees are going to be right on the backstop for any sort of musketry that's going on around here. And of course, at chest height, balls that have hit trees are going to be fired at human beings who are milling around these trees. It's pretty remarkable that 200 years later it's all still here.
Wellington had 1,200 men defending Hougoumont. It's believed that Napoleon sent 4,000 to take it. And now metal detecting is revealing definitive proof of that savage assault by the French.
By the wall, picking up multiple targets. They look like French musket balls, all concentrated within probably a foot square. I've picked up 4. One of them, if you can see, if I don't drop it, is embedded. It's still got brick dust on it.
The shot struck the southern wall, which the records say was where Napoleon ordered his attack to begin. Now inside the farm, the team uncover great quantities of French musket balls, which reveal how desperately Napoleon's army fought to get in.
Further in, we're looking at musket shot that has been fired at close range. It's impacted. So what it looks like we've got here is French making it at least to the top of the wall and firing down into the enclosure, possibly also through the loopholes, all of which is going to be defended. So I think what we've got is a picture of a very, very brutal fight on the wall top, much more so than the accounts that in some cases lead us to believe.
Records tell us that the British defence of the southern wall held firm, while on the north side of the farm, more French troops desperately attacked the heavy gates of the farmyard.
It's a pretty formidable target once it's closed, but you have to close the gates first, and that's where the whole battle could have turned. Now we're opening the gates. Check no Frenchmen. Okay.
The gates had been left open. 30 French soldiers seized their chance and burst through. If reinforcements managed to join them, a British massacre and a French victory at Waterloo would have been inevitable.
An absolute desperate fight, and the men who came to close this gate left that fight going on behind them, turned their backs on it and pushed the gate closed against this great press of Frenchmen who had seized the advantage and were trying to get in. So a pretty key moment in the battle.
According to the history books, Wellington's Coldstream Guards forced the gates closed and saved their army from disaster. But on day 7, the team finds possible evidence to show that Napoleon only intensified his efforts to seize the farm.
What you have here is basically a hollow ball packed with gunpowder. It was fired by the French from the ridge behind the complex. That fire happened in the afternoon of the battle, and the idea was basically to burn down the buildings. And they succeeded in that. These explosive shells set fire to the chateau, the house, which burned to the ground, and the various outbuildings were burned as well. And so from this, on the face of it, fairly unexciting lump of rust, we've added another piece to the jigsaw that is the Battle of Waterloo.
Napoleon followed this barrage with an attack on the blazing farm by another 5,500 men. But Wellington could only call upon an extra 800, leaving him in a precarious position. To hold the farm, he needed to keep his outnumbered troops supplied with ammunition. And a trench dug in a sunken road at the back of the farm may reveal for the first time how he did it.
I think that is the 1815 surface.
What makes you think it's 1815?
The pottery and the queen that came out.
The artefacts from the bottom of this trench date to the year of the battle, showing that 200 years ago the road's surface was several feet lower than it is today. That would have provided the Allies with crucial cover from the French. And the team also think that this sunken road gave Wellington hidden access to the farm, to get his supply wagons in without the French noticing.
If you've actually got quite an enclosed hedge line and you've got literally almost a tunnel, then that would have given him so much better cover. And although it was still bare feet to get horse and wagon down here under French attack and then to get it across to the gate and into Huguemont Farm, it does actually, to me, give me a better picture of what the surroundings must have been like.
This dig may have finally revealed Wellington's secret advantage. A hidden road that enabled him to keep his troops armed, to defend Huguemont Farm, defeat Napoleon, and win the Battle of Waterloo. To explain more about how the battle was fought and its grim aftermath, the dig team have brought some of their finds into our lab.
So, Charlie, how important was Hougoumont Farm and the battle here in the context of Waterloo more generally?
Certainly for Wellington's army, it was very important. The French are in blue and the British are in red. And Hougoumont here stands, together with the wood to the south and the orchard, in front of this ridge, guarding Wellington's right flank. Had the French got through at Hougoumont and seized control of that, they would have been able to secure potentially a battle-winning advantage.
I think we always tend to think, or at least I always tend to think, of Waterloo being a battle of the British against the French, but Dominique, there were other people there as well.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of other nations involved in the conflict, and you have Hanoverians, Anglo-Dutch, Brunswick, Belgo-Dutch, and of course the Prussians. They played an essential role in the English victory.
We've got some of the finds here. Dominique, can you tell me what that is?
Well, I can tell you that it's a French musket ball because it's smaller than the English one, as you can see very clearly.
I think we've uncovered why there was an Allied victory, and they simply had bigger musket balls.
And the fact that the French one are smaller than the English one means that the English can reuse French musket balls, which is not the case on the contrary.
So the English could fit the smaller bullets back into the smaller musket balls back into your own rifle.
That is a significant advantage.
So the documentary sources, the eyewitness accounts, and the archaeological finds, they do agree on one thing: this was a brutal battle. Do we have any idea what the total human cost actually was?
Yeah, probably around 12,000 killed, and you have to add to that the wounded and the disappeared, so around 50,000 people.
And what happened to all the bodies then?
Most of the armies would have moved on by the time we get around to burying the dead. So we're talking about the local people, the farmers, the peasants, the people who lived on the land, trying to get rid of these bodies that would be stinking, causing a great mess and getting in the way of agriculture. So they tipped into a grave and got rid of. Anything that is useful, can be used, can be sold, will be stripped from them, and the bodies will be disposed of as quickly as possible.
Scavenging among the dead for valuables was grim enough. But around the time of the Battle of Waterloo, this common practice took an altogether darker turn. I've come to see the evidence for myself, right in the depths of the Museum of London.
Well, this is the Museum of London's bone store, and every one of these boxes contains at least one human skeleton. In total, there are 20,000 skeletons down here.
Amongst them is remarkable evidence of a macabre but lucrative trade, one made possible by the vanity of London's rich and the huge death rates at battles like Waterloo.
So this is an incredible bit of dental work that's been carried out.
Yeah, I mean, this is remarkable. So this is the mandible, the lower jaw of a female, and she was buried at St Marylebone Church, and we know her name because she had a coffin plate, and that survived in enough detail for us to be able to read what her name was. So she's Mrs Charlotte Bampton Taylor, and we know that she died in 1837 and was 77 years old. And to be buried where she was would indicate she had money, she was high status. And looking at this that you can see here, which is a rather remarkable piece of dentistry.
Is that a real tooth that's there? I mean, this is it's a false tooth in her mouth.
Yes.
But it looks like a real human tooth.
Yeah, it does. It's fantastic. So it is a real human tooth from somebody else, and it's been put into an ivory plug to fit it in, and then to actually stabilise it within her own mouth and around the teeth is this metal wire that's been wrapped around, and that from tests has come back as being platinum. So very expensive.
It's an extraordinary piece of 200-year-old dentistry, but more extraordinary still is where the tooth itself may have come from.
When we see this sort of form of dentistry, we have a term that we relate to as Waterloo teeth.
Related to the Battle of Waterloo?
Yes, and that's because we know that, unfortunately, when these men were involved in these battles, and somewhere such as Waterloo, you've got very high death rates, you've got lots of people that are dying. You then have an opportunity to actually claim something to make money, and that would be the teeth. Teeth were very lucrative. So people would actually then go around extracting the teeth to then sell and use in other people's mouths.
It's
area
extraordinary. So you've got this well-heeled woman. She's lost quite a few teeth, actually, but she's lost this tooth right in the front, which does affect her appearance. And she's paid to have this expensive dental work done so that she can smile at somebody with a dead man's tooth in her mouth.
Yes.
Stories like these are why I love archaeology. It has the power to shock us, with grim revelations like this about what London's rich did in the name of vanity. And it can surprise us too, with new insights into an iconic battle that defined Britain and Europe for centuries. But few of archaeology's surprises come as unexpectedly as in our next dig diary. It comes from Lenborough in Buckinghamshire, where one amateur made the find of a lifetime.
In the early 11th century, marauding Vikings terrorised southern England. Ethelred was the Anglo-Saxon ruler who attempted to buy peace, paying off the invading armies with sackloads of silver. It was a waste of money. Within a generation, England was ruled by a Danish king, and the Viking conquest was complete. 1,000 years later, in Buckinghamshire, an amateur metal detectorist made an astonishing discovery, including evidence of the desperation of the Anglo-Saxons in the face of the Viking threat. And luckily, he had a camera with him.
In December 2014, Paul Coleman was taking part in an annual metal detectorist rally in Lenborough, and he was planning to call it a day.
After an hour and a half, we got back to the same point we'd virtually started from and decided that with only one musket ball to show between three of us, that there wasn't a great deal in this field, or if there was, it was too deep for us to pick up. My friend's detector interferes with mine. The radio frequencies are very close. So I asked him if he would move over. He said his was fine, so I should move. So I did. I moved 4 or 5 yards away and walked immediately onto a large signal, which turned out to be a really large signal.
As Paul began to dig down, he saw something unmistakable.
So as soon as I saw that shiny disc, I knew it was a coin. I also knew that it was potentially more than one because the signal was really large, so I just had an inkling that this was going to be something special. When I bent down to pick that one up and I saw the others, that's when I realised that this was a large hoard of coins.
With the help of the Portable Antiquities Scheme, Paul uncovered a lead container overflowing with silver and gold coins. He could scarcely believe his eyes.
Some serious cash down there.
He had one job.
Yeah, one job, and all he had to do was look after them when I found them.
I bet he had a bad day when he never brought these back.
Straight away, they began to wonder where this huge fortune had come from. Then they spotted a clue, the name of a king.
It looks like an Ethelred. Is it? Well, is that Ethelred?
But it says on there, can you not?
Yeah, I think it's Ethelred.
Ethelred was the English king from 978 AD to 1016. He was so desperate to end the Vikings' raids, he tried to pay them to go away. Ethelred's name is crucial to dating these coins to sometime in his reign, 1,000 years ago.
It's getting to the bottom, isn't it?
It's getting dark in here. We've got a lot of people around us.
That's the light, mate.
Be careful, because some of them are really brittle.
Yeah.
Light was fading. Under the guidance of an archaeologist from the Portable Antiquities Scheme, Paul and his friends worked quickly and carefully to rescue the treasure. But the stash seemed never ending.
It's a sad day when you run out of bags to fill your silver coins up with, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when they're that big.
Shall we just leave the rest then? If we haven't got any bags.
You can afford to.
Oh, we got some more. Okay, okay.
Just,
Fair enough.
No.
Just put less in. Okay.
Email to head office and see who's see if they know whether the coin guy's in.
They took the hoard back to the safety of a local farmer's kitchen and spent the rest of the night counting out their treasure. 5,252 silver coins, each one a millennium old, many in near mint condition, and priceless to historians. They were sent to the British Museum, when numismatist Gareth Williams began piecing together what this remarkable hoard could tell us about Britain 1,000 years ago. Now he's brought along the most revealing specimens for us to look at in our lab.
Well, Gareth, these coins are looking absolutely beautiful now that they've been cleaned up, and this is just a small sample of the collection.
That's right. Altogether, over 5,000 coins, so one of the largest hoards of Anglo-Saxon coins ever discovered.
And when do they date to?
They date to the late Anglo-Saxon period, and we've got coins in here of two kings, Ethelred II, who ruled from 978 to 1016, and his successor Knut, who ruled from 1016 to 1035. We've got the savings hoard of the earlier part, and then a currency hoard, coins withdrawn from what was current at the time of burial, which is the last few years of Knut's reign, so probably sometime in the 1030s.
Can you pull out one of each ruler from
Yes,
there?
certainly. Here is Ethelred II, and here is Knut. Now, these aren't portraits of either of them. Coins of this period generally just imitate late Roman imperial designs, and both of these are just images of late Roman emperors with the king's name on.
Canute was the Danish king determined to seize power in England and to establish Viking rule here. In desperation, King Ethelred resorted to throwing money at the problem, earning himself an unfortunate nickname.
The English kingdom, which was more or less quite a new creation by the 10th century, was under a lot of pressure by Viking raids from Viking armies increasingly during the reign of Ethelred, and we know Ethelred as Ethelred the Unready. The indication is that it's a contemporary nickname, and the response to these Viking raids seems to be paying greater quantities of money to Vikings, quite simply to go away as well, and we know the Vikings don't go away. They see the English kingdom, which was very rich by this time, as a great source of wealth.
The coins in this hoard reveal how desperate Ethelred became when faced with a full-scale Viking invasion.
So Ethelred tried paying them to go away. That didn't work. He tried fighting them to drive them away. That didn't work. But he also tried a third method, and that's also represented in this hoard by a rather unusual type of coin. And you can see this doesn't have a royal image on it.
I can see this is a little lamb. He's carrying a cross under his arm. He's got a halo as well, so we're quite clear about it being a holy lamb.
This seems to be part of a sort of coordinated year of prayer and increased piety in the year 1009. The point was that the Vikings were seen as God's judgment on the English for their ungodly behaviour. And so the theory was, if the English became more godly, maybe God would reward them for that with support against the Vikings.
So it's literally reduced to praying for help.
Exactly.
This new hoard reveals the last hope of a desperate king. Coins minted with Christian imagery in the hope that God would help him beat the Vikings. But Ethelred's piety was in vain. Canute seized power, and the Viking conquest was complete. Finds like this have made it a remarkable year for archaeology in the east of England, and in London, one giant engineering project has offered an unparalleled opportunity to peel back the layers of the capital's history, to reveal how the city first began to boom.
Since Roman times, men and women have flocked to London, driving its population from 30,000 2 millennia ago to 7 million today.
And the capital is still growing. This is one of its newest and biggest developments. Crossrail, London's high-speed underground rail network. It's a massive piece of civil engineering. But it's also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for archaeologists. The vast excavations are revealing what life was like for Londoners as the city mushroomed over 2 millennia.
But what we're also discovering is the cost in human life.
Liverpool Street railway station in the very heart of the city's buzzing financial district. Right outside the station, archaeologists from Crossrail and Museum of London Archaeology have uncovered clues to the brutal violence at the heart of Roman rule in Britain.
We're working on excavating this Roman road, which is a major Roman thoroughfare. Yeah, so what we've uncovered just in the last day is a number of skulls appearing in this area. They're actually mostly upside down, so they're not completely obvious. There's literally a line stretching from there, is the last one we found, all the way back to the end of the dig. The possibility is that these are beheading victims.
Just a few days later, another remarkable burial shows more evidence of Roman execution.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've just had a really interesting find down here at Liverpool Street. We're in the Eastern Ticket Hall excavation, and we've just found an intact burial that most likely dates to the Roman period. And the most interesting thing about it is you can probably see the skull has been detached and placed between the knees of this individual. There could be a number of different reasons. The first one obviously is an execution and beheading.
We know that Rome ruled its empire with an iron fist, but can remains like these really be evidence of its rough justice in Britain? As an osteologist myself, I want to see the bones with my own eyes. So Don and Jay have brought one skeleton into our lab.
It's interesting to have such explicit evidence of decapitation at this site, and I believe this skeleton shows decapitation again.
Exactly. What we have here is the remains of a male adult that we found in the cemetery, and what's very interesting to see is in the neck area, on the first thoracic vertebra, we have a very clear cut mark going through the skeleton. For example, this facet would normally fit on here, but it's been sliced off by a very sharp blade. And this cut has probably caused full decapitation of this individual.
There's a polishing of the bone, isn't there, where the blade has come through here. So right at the base of somebody's neck. And do you think this would have been a blow coming in from the back then?
We believe so. It seems that for the blade to have come in and to have not affected the other spinous processes, it seems that the neck probably was flexed, in which case you'd suspect that the cut did come from the back.
Yes. So by looking really carefully at the orientation of those cuts, you can reconstruct the grisly last moments of that person's life.
Severed vertebrae, decapitated skulls. It's chilling evidence of the brutal reality of Roman rule in Britain. These discoveries have been made thanks to Crossrail's massive excavations, but not all archaeology involves digging into the ground. In the Thames estuary, a team of divers is battling the elements to solve a maritime mystery, and they've sent us this dive diary. In 1665, Britain was gearing up for war with the Dutch, primarily to win back valuable trade routes to the New World. Among the Royal Navy's flagships was the London, a mighty gunship 140 feet long and armed with 76 cannon. It's thought that on the 8th of March 1665, she was still crammed with guests, yet to disembark further down the river, when suddenly, in the mouth of the Thames, an explosion blew her to pieces.
No one knows what caused that explosion, and to have any hope of solving the mystery, the first challenge is to rescue the London from the savage currents and ravenous wildlife of the Thames estuary before she's lost forever.
In 2014, Cotswold Archaeology, Historic England and local South End residents launched a rescue mission. The team returned in the summer of 2015 when they recorded this footage.
So this is day 2 and we're back out on the site of the London. our main objectives for this season, which is the excavation of the gun carriage. This was found at the end of last year, and we just sort of uncovered the very top of it. So the priority for this season is to continue excavating the gun carriage.
We're going to commence dive operations now.
Unfortunately, the wreck's location means that the London isn't going to give up her secrets easily.
Well, as you can see here, we're right next to the main shipping channel in and out of the Thames. So this is a very busy shipping lane. And some of the bigger ships are churning up the water, and we know that because when we're down there, visibility goes from okay to nothing, and the noise kind of vibrates through your chest.
But noise and poor visibility aren't the team's biggest problems. As turbulence from passing ships stirs up the sediment, it exposes the site to the destructive forces of nature.
So you've got marine organisms like teredo and gribble that eat the wood, and that kind of destroys it, and that can happen very quickly. So this is what's really important, the work that we're doing, and especially recovering this gun carriage, because if that remains in situ as it is, it will not be there for very much longer.
Despite these treacherous conditions, the team has recovered a wealth of finds, which show how the Thames silt can perfectly preserve the artefacts hidden beneath it.
This looks really in really good condition. I mean, you can see the grain. It doesn't look like it was used very much at the time either. No. There's not much in the way of wear. Not much wear.
Very nice.
Yeah, nice. Well done, Steve.
Some more recent finds. This is what I covered a few weeks ago. A little sundial compass. To me, this would have been like a Rolex watch of a day. You'd have the sundial, the compass in there, matched it up, that would have lifted up and they could get the dates of the time.
Steve believes that this probably would have belonged to one of the higher-ranking crew members.
You know, the chap who had this would be in a nice cabin, you know, far more comfortable than down towards the bilges.
These are just a fraction of the objects recovered from the wreck so far. But time and tide wait for no man, so the team's focus soon returns to the star attraction.
The gun carriage is the main objective of this week, and we've been progressively digging out that carriage and trying to uncover it as much as we can. Once we've uncovered it, the aim is to recover it.
Working in such poor visibility, the team relies heavily on the underwater survey, which reveals much more detail about the location of the carriage within the wreck.
So this line here, we think, is the bottom of the, close to the bottom of the ship, and this kind of dark line here is where the carriages are, which looks like, well, what we think is the main gun deck, because that's what we think. We've got the side of the ship here, lying on its side, because the carriages are pointing downwards rather than lying horizontal. And the fact that the gun carriages, or at least the one that we're excavating at the moment, has got all its associated gun furniture, tackle, kind of tells us that this object, this artifact, hasn't moved very far from its original position.
Finally, on the very last day of the dive, and after 3.5 centuries lying on the seabed, the wooden gun carriage is rescued from the depths.
We've finally recovered the gun carriage, and that was a real effort. It was in a really awkward position to try and get to the bottom of it. It was, trapped under many artifacts, very fragile artifacts, so we had to recover them carefully without destroying them. But eventually we've got it out and stropped it up and recovered it, and it was a great relief when it finally broke the surface. It was really amazing, actually, to think that that's been under the water for 350 years, and then suddenly it rises up.
Weighing in at around a tonne, this is the first complete gun carriage to be recovered from the London. It's just one of a wealth of clues rescued from the seabed, some of which offer intriguing insights into the final moments on board the doomed ship. These finds were all made in a small area, suggesting that the London was jam-packed with supplies and ammunition.
It sounds like the gunpowder was all together then in one place to cause such a massive explosion to rip this whole ship apart.
The area that a lot of the materials come from is not much bigger than this table. And these are only a sort of a small selection of what we found. And yet we've got over 80 fragments of linstock, a huge number of handspikes. And it's early days, but we would think that perhaps we've either got excess supplies on the ship, or because it was fairly early in the voyage, perhaps they were putting everything out on deck to redistribute it between all the guns that were on the London.
So the ammunition had yet to be safely stowed. But one find shows how the cannons would have been lit.
An incredible achievement to get that gun carriage out of the water. But here we have some of the other artefacts as well. And what have we got here?
We've got a selection of linstocks that were used to light the cannon from a safe distance.
I'm intrigued by these items. How do they work?
They are turned wooden sticks, basically, and you would have a rope wrapped around these, which we call a slow match, and the end of it passes through this hole here and is slowly smouldering away at one end, and then you hold it at the end and light the cannon. And on this particular one, we've got some scorch marks, obviously real evidence to show that they have been used and have been scorched by the slow match that was around them.
It seems then that the London was crammed with ammunition, and she may also have been crowded with guests who were yet to disembark downriver. But the archaeologists also made further finds, which hint at a possible cause of the terrible accident waiting to happen.
Some quite personal items as well, really. These are little tobacco pipes, are they?
Yeah. Tobacco pipes, though. I mean, this is a ship that was going out to war that obviously had cannon on board. You've got a ship that is packed full of gunpowder, and you've got people smoking.
I know, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster, really, isn't it? I guess health and safety might have been a bit different 350 years ago, but with the crew members, you've got visitors on board, you've got over 300 barrels of gunpowder, naked flames from both the linstock and people smoking from the candles. They're going on their outward voyage, and then something happened and it blew up.
So we don't necessarily need to be looking for a suspicious reason for this explosion. It doesn't need to have been arson or done with any intent. It could have purely been an accident.
I think that's probably most likely.
And I think a really important message as well, which is do not get on a warship full of gunpowder and smoke.
Yes.
We may finally have a plausible theory to explain the London disaster. A flagship vessel, fully loaded with gunpowder, a distracted crew, and someone's disastrous mistake. The Museum of London Bone Store holds more evidence of the dangers of naval life. This man served in Nelson's Navy in the 1800s and lived to well over 50. But his skeleton tells us that his life at sea was brutal.
Although obviously we're looking at him as a skeleton, he's dead, what we're trying to do is look at the things that we can see on the bones to tell us what actually then may have happened in their life and how then they coped with it. And looking at his skeleton, he's remarkable because when we see lots of the things that we do, he obviously had a hard life and managed to survive lots of nasty insults and impacts.
This collarbone has got a healed fracture in it. Now, that must have happened years before this individual died, because it's healed quite nicely, although it has never regained its original shape. So these are the kind of fractures that you might sustain from a fall onto the shoulder. Are there any other injuries?
There are. He's got some fractures to the ribs, again all on one side, and they would appear to follow a similar pattern to the clavicle, so that might indicate that that's happening at the same time, it's the same event. We've then also got the fracture of the femur, where you can see there. So
it does make you wonder if this all happened at the same time. It's all on the right-hand side of his body.
Yes.
These are the kinds of fractures that you might get, for instance, from falling from a height. What else, Helena, then?
And he's also got a fracture to the first metacarpal, and then we've got the fracture also there on the radius, where you tend to sort of fall, you put your hand out. He's got a broken nose,
Yeah.
so you can sort of see there. You've, again, heel, but you've got that sort of deflection.
Well, again, this is most likely not to have been caused by a fall, but actually to have been caused by some, how do we say, interpersonal aggression, being
yes.
punched in the face.
Yes. With the vertebra that you can see here, they're all very frilly. They shouldn't look like that. And then you can see where you've actually got some crushing of the vertebra. So if we come there to that one...
That's lost a lot of height. So a thoracic vertebra, a vertebra from the back of the chest, there's a fairly normal-looking vertebra.
Yes.
And there's the one that suffered this
rather thin, yes.
wedge fracture.
Yes. So that's been completely squashed, reduced in height. So he's got a whole suite of changes that you would be looking at, but also then you're thinking of the consequences and impact of how he would be able to function in a daily life, but also how he was functioning while he was still at sea, and then also later on in older age, the potential pain, discomfort that you might have from these. It's phenomenal when you're looking at the skeleton and you can see so many things that have affected them in life. But the fact that they actually were able to survive, and particularly when we think at the times in which they lived, they wouldn't have had all of the things to help them that we do now. So that's even more amazing that they've actually survived, really. So they really were hardy and tough.
The London set sail in 1656, just as our navy began to assert its will across the world. Within 200 years, Britannia ruled the waves. Sailors like this man made that possible, and he was left with the scars. But in the mid-20th century, the tables turned, and Britain was on the back foot as it desperately defended itself against savage attacks by Hitler's Luftwaffe. But one thing remained the same: Britons put themselves on the line for their country.
Our next dig takes us to West Sussex, where archaeologists are shining a new light on a story we think we know so well, the Battle of Britain. But their new discovery reveals forgotten heroes, a machine and a pilot.
In the summer of 1940, waves of German Luftwaffe filled our skies. Hitler's plan: crush the smaller RAF and then launch a full-scale invasion. Standing in his way, the iconic Spitfires and their daring British pilots. But a dig on this hillside is reminding us that Spitfires didn't win the Battle of Britain on their own, and that our British pilots weren't the only heroes.
We are excavating the remains of a Hurricane shot down in the Battle of Britain on the 9th September 1940.
Hawker Hurricanes actually shot down 50% more enemy planes than did Spitfires. Yet, it's the Spitfire whose name has become iconic.
The Hurricane was, if you like, the forgotten hero of the Battle of Britain. I mean, it's not forgotten, but it didn't get all the glamour of the Spitfire.
Unfortunately, this Hurricane never made it back to base.
This is the impact crater. It's slightly ovalled. It's where the aircraft's come down and hit. Then obviously the weight of the aircraft is displaced all the earth and the chalk. We've had pistons and valves and bits of engine casing. So now we've cleaned it up, we can see where it is. We can now proceed to go down and see what else is there.
Amongst the finds recovered is evidence of the sheer violence of the impact.
This is part of the ammunition box that contained the 303 rounds for one of the machine guns. It's just a thin aluminium box. But when the aircraft crashed, there was a lot of ammunition on it. And what happened was the force pushed all the ammunition down into the box. And we can actually see here, this is one of the bullets. It's actually punched its way through the box and made a very neat little hole there. So that's a cracking find.
75 years to the day after the crash, one of the larger pieces is discovered, part of the propeller assembly from the nose of the plane, and it has survived intact.
This is where the propeller blade would go, so the propeller blade was sticking out here, and that would be rotating, and there'll be another one about here and another one about here. So you've got the three blades, rotor hub under the cones.
Here to help with the heavy lifting is a group from Operation Nightingale. an initiative to rehabilitate British soldiers recently returned from active service.
The team today is largely composed of military veterans. Excitingly for us, we've got 3 Polish soldiers that have served in Afghanistan, and they're working alongside British veterans, people who've fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, but also people who served in Northern Ireland and indeed in the Falklands campaign.
For these Polish veterans, this is a chance to celebrate the other unsung heroes of the story, the Polish pilots who fought for the Allies in squadrons like the 303.
This is great for me because pilot with the division 303 is Polish heroes, Polish flying heroes. And Sergeant Lynch, this is great pilot with the squadron.
303 Squadron was a predominantly Polish unit, and it became the most successful in the Battle of Britain, shooting down 108 German planes in a single month.
The Polish pilot, they were almost, if you like, the forgotten heroes of the Battle of Britain. They were relatively small in number, and what they did, just like the Hurricane really, was disproportionate to their numbers. But they achieved an incredibly high kill score. Their determination to get at the enemy was second to none for obvious reasons. Their country had been invaded, so consequently their kill rate of enemy aircraft destroyed was significantly higher than any other squadron.
21-year-old Kazimierz Wunsch was a sergeant in 303 Squadron when his Hurricane was shot down on the 9th of September 1940. Luckily, he managed to parachute to safety, and as the presence here of his daughter and granddaughter testifies, he lived to tell the tale.
He was slightly injured. The oil blew into his face, so he had some burns, and he had was something injured in his leg and in his back. But after staying in Hove Hospital for a month, he went back to flying, and he was flying until the end of the war.
My grandfather died when I was 6 months old, so I never got to really know him, and I'm amazed that we found this plane. The last person to see it intact before it went into the ground was my grandfather, and that means a lot to me. There's a piece, I think I'll remember it to the end of my days. It's the Morse panel. He would have touched that, he would have looked at that on a daily basis every time he got into the plane. If his radio had gone down, that might have saved his life. And so to see the words Morse and all the other bits on that piece is just incredible, and it does make me feel a real connection with him.
The 75th anniversary of the crash is marked by a rare sight, a flypast by a fully restored original World War II Hurricane.
It got really quiet.
Now, what are you actually hoping to discover by undertaking an excavation like this? Because we know that hurricanes were used in the war, we know that hurricanes went down in the war, and in fact we know that this actual hurricane went down in the war. So what other information are you hoping to glean?
This really is not going to change the story of the Battle of Britain, clearly. However, you can get little vignettes from it, and it's the personal stories. Occasionally you get bits of kits from the pilot. The ammunition will also tell you a story about that particular day in September 1940, in the hope that this aircraft was going to bring down some of those attacking aircraft. I think that's really important to remember that the Poles played a very big role, but there were pilots from Czechoslovakia as well, French pilots, a couple of Americans, South Africans, Australians, people from all around the world contributing to this global effort to stop this hideous entity from being able to invade. And so this artefact, although it is just a bullet, it's way more than that, because this has got a narrative of those days in 1940 and a critical part of our island's history, really. What do you think it was about the Polish pilots that gave them such a good kill rate? I think there's almost a visceral hatred that goes on with the Polish pilots. We've been talking about the defending of Britain with the Battle of Britain. Now, the Poles didn't have that luxury. In 1939, their country had been invaded. It's the reason, ostensibly, Britain goes to war. And so they are fighting to try and liberate their country, and the only way they can do it at that time is to fight back at the Luftwaffe. And so they are a determined bunch. They're a group with anger. They are a group that perform incredibly well.
And despite this plane crashing, of course, Wunsch himself escaped, and as we saw, his daughter and his granddaughter in the film, and I think the archaeology was very important to them.
It was, and to be able to have that hands-on for your family tree. That's a physical manifestation of your heritage, which is really, really powerful. So you're able to put your fingers where your grandfather or your father had put his in the cockpit, or to look through a piece of perspex, bit of glass. So you're looking through that same viewing screen that your relative had. And that's a really strange feeling in archaeology, to be able to have that direct connection with people from the past.
This dig has helped a family connect with their war hero from a brave generation, and reminds us all about the foreign pilots who risked everything to save Britain. It reveals the power archaeology has to tell our stories, whatever the era, from a bloody battle fought in our skies in 1940 to the brutal oppression of Roman rule. While from the silt of the Thames and from a trench in Waterloo, new clues have helped to solve age-old mysteries, to reveal not only what came before us, but to show how our past still shapes who we are today. Britain has an epic history, but within it there's a wealth of untold secrets still to uncover.
It's a really key find of the week.
So every year, hundreds of archaeologists set out, hunting for clues to solve the mystery of who we are and where we've come from.
We've just found this amazing pendant.
Over the past year, their discoveries have been more exciting than ever. This series will explore the best of them.
Just found a coin. Oh, marvellous.
Brought to you from the field in a very special way.
Each excavation has been filmed for us as it happened by the archaeologists themselves.
It looks absolutely fantastic.
I bet he had a bad day when he never brought these back.
Their dig diaries mean that we can be there for every crucial moment of discovery.
Do we have a winner here?
I think it's stunning.
Incredible.
Our archaeologists will be joining us here in our special lab to take a closer look at their finds and to figure out what they really mean. This is so exciting. Welcome to Digging for Britain.
In this episode, we're exploring the discoveries from the north of Britain that change what we know about this island's story. We scramble to uncover the earliest origins of Scotland's first kingdoms. We're there for the find of a lifetime that reveals the true extent of Viking power.
Oh, do we have a winner here?
And a new housing development reveals the mass graveyard of warriors whose people may have marched from Europe to settle in Yorkshire.
It looks absolutely fantastic.
These discoveries are rewriting our history. To find out how, archaeologist Matt Williams and I have been given special access to Yorkshire Museum. Its collection tells the story of the North and the people who settled here.
The Gilling sword.
And we're going behind the scenes to the back rooms that ordinary visitors just don't get to see.
You could get lost in here for days.
Star Car is an archaeological site of world importance. Excavations began here in 1948 and have revealed a Stone Age settlement 11,000 years old. The whole site covers 5 acres. Discoveries at Star Car include the remains of Britain's oldest house, ancient tools and the earliest carpentry in Europe. Finds like these have shown how our Stone Age ancestors lived. Digging for Britain first visited the site in 2011, when I discovered that the team's work had become a race against time. The soil at Star Car was becoming acidic and destroying the evidence.
So that's some antler from the original excavations on the site.
Yeah.
So when would that have been excavated?
1950.
1950.
This antler has been preserved in almost perfect condition, But the items being pulled from the ground 60 years later have deteriorated drastically.
It's like a piece of rubber. It's basically because the water table has fallen dramatically.
Right.
That's let oxygen into the deposits, and that's created a chemical reaction. We've been told by our specialists it's a bit like car battery acid.
It is shocking to see how the acid is attacking Star Car, and it shows just how urgent the work carried out by Nikki and her team really is. But now they are finally running out of time as 6 decades of research at Star Car come to an end.
They're hoping to solve one last mystery and reveal the true significance of this site to our Stone Age ancestors. Was Star Car just a settlement, or do the clues show that it was something much more? This is their dig diary. From day one, it was clear that the soil had become even more acidic.
It's actually very fragile. This is one of the problems that we have, and this bit is turning to jelly.
The chances of finding any well-preserved artefacts seemed slim. Then, a couple of weeks in, the archaeologists dug another trench where, remarkably, the soil conditions were very different and the preservation outstanding.
Just cleaning off this area behind me, and it's incredibly exciting. Here we've got an absolutely jam-packed area of bone and flint and wood that we've not seen anywhere else on the site. And in the rest of the trenches, we've had a real problem. We've had very acid conditions, which has meant that the bone and antler has disappeared. So this is a really amazing insight into what people were doing on the edge of the lake here. People are placing bone and antler and wood in this area.
But why would people have been deliberately placing these materials here 11,000 years ago? A few days later, another remarkable discovery could be a clue.
It's a deer.
It is a deer, yeah.
It's a cluster of deer skulls.
It's a really amazing example. There are lots from this site, but this one is very robust. You can see the antlers here coming off the main skull, and it's also in association with a couple of roe deer skulls, one here and one here. So we're just cleaning it up some more, and then we'll be lifting it very carefully and taking it to the conservation labs.
This discovery is new evidence to support a growing theory that explains the wealth of deer skulls at Star Car.
These have been made into headdresses from red deer skulls, and we think that they were possibly used by shamans, wearing them on their heads as part of ritual practices. It's just amazing to think that 11,000 years ago someone might have had one of these on their heads.
In the final few days, even more of these partial deer skulls are uncovered. But can they really be ritual headdresses? I'm in the vaults of York Museum to see the evidence for myself.
Can we open it up?
We can.
Have a look.
It's like Christmas.
So this is the latest one. So it is just the top of the skull, essentially. We've lost all of the nose and the upper jaw down here.
We have.
So it is just this uppermost part with the antlers attached.
And that's one of the first clues that tells us that this probably isn't just a piece of deer skull that's been found in the ground. It's been worked by human hands for a particular purpose. If this is a deer in its prime, a large deer, it would have very big antlers, and they've been trimmed back. And what that does is effectively makes this a lot lighter. An almost cap-type shape. If you think of a hollowed-out skull, it's almost a cap-type shape going on there. So one of the other features that we see, and we certainly see on other frontlets that have been found, are these piercings, these circular piercings that you see through the skull. Now, these piercings could be for sinew or for cord to pass through. It suggests that this might be something that's been worked by human hands to be worn on the head.
And it's really important as well that this isn't a unique object, that it's one of many that have been found at Star Car.
Just over 20 similar objects have been found at Star Car, so this is not a one-off, and they all seem to be treated in the same way. So perhaps it's a group of objects that are being used for a very specific purpose and made in a very specific way.
The archaeologists think it's likely that these skulls really were worn as ritual headdresses. Together with the wealth of votive offerings of antler and bone, the finds suggest that Star was more than just a settlement. Back at the dig on day 40, the team makes another remarkable and exceptionally rare discovery, which also hints at the ritual significance of Star.
We have actually just found this amazing pendant which actually has artwork on it. It's so rare to find something like this. There's only a few pieces of artwork from this country and very few from the whole of Europe. It's very classic Mesolithic. It has geometric lines on it.
An 11,000-year-old pendant, piles of bone and antler. Nikki believes that this could be evidence that Star held sacred significance.
And we're really beginning to think that these things weren't just lost, they were perhaps some kind of votive offerings that were placed in this particular spot.
A piece of Mesolithic artwork is an extraordinary find anywhere in Europe. I can't wait to hear what this one can tell us about Star.
This is so exciting. When I heard that you'd found this, I didn't quite believe it, Nikki, I must say. You must have been thrilled to find that on your site.
The more we've looked at it and the more we've analysed it, the more exciting we're getting about it, really, because Mesolithic art is incredibly rare, particularly for this country. And so to find something like this is really spectacular.
I can certainly see quite a bit of detail here, but also you've got this enlarged image of it, which really brings it out, doesn't it? That you've got these longer incised grooves on it, but lots of little tiny grooves as well. An awful lot of detail here.
One interpretation I quite like at the moment is that we might have a tree on here, so that's the trunk and these are the branches coming off it. And I think I'm interested in that because, again, for shamans, sometimes trees can be holy. They link different parts of the spirit world, and so possibly there's something like that to it. The interpretation of pendants in Denmark, where they're usually made of amber, is that they might be amulets, and so they're protecting the person who wears them.
So over the 6 decades or so that excavations have been going on at Star, what has that added to our knowledge of the Mesolithic in Britain?
Because we've opened up such a large area, we have a much better understanding of how people were living there. We have houses, huts on the dry land. We have great big platforms made out of timbers on the lake edge with all these bones and headdresses and so on around them. And we think that this actually might be quite a special place in the landscape. It's at the mouth of the lake. And when people are coming upriver, it's the first place they come to as they reach the lake. So perhaps it's kind of like an entrance way where certain interesting rituals and activities are happening.
The modified deer skulls, votive offerings, and now this exceptionally rare piece of Stone Age art provide us with extraordinary insights into life in Britain 11,000 years ago. The clues from Star tell us not only about survival on a day-to-day basis, but allow us a precious glimpse into the spiritual and artistic aspects of Mesolithic life. The amazing discoveries at Star are the work of dedicated professionals, but sometimes we have to thank the devotion, enthusiasm, and luck of a band of amateurs.
Metal detectorists are a special breed, spending hours scouring the countryside and beaches looking for treasure. And very, very occasionally, they find some. Now, a hoard of treasure buried in the ground away from human settlement or other signs of human activity on its own can only offer us limited information. But sometimes the objects themselves tell a story, as with this Viking hoard.
Dumfries, in the west of Scotland, where a keen metal detectorist invested months of his own time researching one particular field. What Derek McLennan found was the discovery of his lifetime that reveals the wide connections of the Vikings.
It was harvest time, so there was bales of hay in the field, and I'd been going up and down towards one particular bale, and then I decided to change tack and move to another bale. I got a signal, which was very faint, but it sounded like iron. But I thought, well, I've already dug 30 nails, so one more nail won't harm me. And I put the spade into the ground and dug out the clod, noticed something glinting in the hole, put my hand into it, it was quite deep, and when I pulled it out I saw it was silver, rubbed my thumb across it and instantly seen the saltire design, which I knew from my research was a Viking symbol.
Derek realised the importance of his find, so he immediately called the local authorities. They sent an archaeologist to help with the excavation. What they uncovered together was truly astounding. A hoard of Viking arm rings and gold ingots. But there was more.
Oh, wow!
A large Christian cross.
Do we have a winner here?
Its stunning decorations revealed for the first time in 1,000 years.
At that moment, my senses erupted, and the excitement and joy of what I'd discovered really hit me.
But there was even more treasure to come, including this beautiful pot, still wrapped in protective fabric.
The Viking hoard of the decade, I think.
The Vikings were pagan invaders who came from Scandinavia to raid Britain and to set up their own kingdoms here in 793 AD. This find could reveal new insights into this turbulent chapter in British history. So it's been handed to a team from Historic Scotland for analysis. When they lifted the lid of the pot, even more treasure was packed inside. To find out what, the team turns to modern scanning technology.
And that's got quite a density.
Yeah, and then there's a layer of dense material right down at the bottom here. So you can see it's got a lattice on it there.
Yeah.
I'll just see if we can rack through and have a look at some of the other objects.
The scans reveal rings, brooches and other pieces of fine jewellery packed inside the pot. Excavating and conserving them has taken months. Now, almost a year after making his remarkable discovery, Derek has come to view the treasures for himself.
Attached to the inside there. It's kind of hard to put into words. I'm absolutely stunned by the amount of artefacts that come out of the pot, and the textiles, everything being so carefully wrapped and packed, shows that even 1,200 years ago these objects were very coveted and cared for.
This hoard is full of riches and mystery. It brings the Viking world alive and shows that there was more to these legendary warriors than just raiding.
Richard, I think the appropriate response is, wow, this is astonishing. What a beautiful collection.
It's pretty remarkable stuff, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to see it all laid out like this.
One particular treasure has been fashioned from a silver coin, which gives a clue to the date and origins of the hoard.
There's the word Rex.
Yes.
And if you come back round here, you can start with C-O-E-N-W-U-L-F. Cohenwulf.
Cohenwulf.
Rex.
Cohenwulf was the Viking king of Mercia in the Midlands. He ruled from 796 to 821 AD, leading experts to believe that this is when the hoard dates from, a period when Viking raids on Britain were intensifying.
So do you think this is Viking plunder that's been gathered together and buried in the ground?
You can't help but start to speculate that this is some form of Viking raiding booty. Why would someone who was a devout Christian bury things like that wonderful cross?
This cross is
Well, yes, I mean,
gorgeous.
this is exceptional. And a beautiful, wonderful, simple form of the Celtic cross with what we think are the four apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John.
Isn't that wonderful?
Can you see the sort of the saint's head with the,
Yes,
and then
the
the
halo.
hand there?
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, that's straight out of Booker Kell's manuscript, isn't it?
It is, it's wonderful.
And the cross is straight out of the wonderful St John's cross on Iona, for example. It's quite something.
This cross is typical of the treasures plundered by Vikings from Christian monasteries across Britain and Europe. But further clues in the hoard show that the Vikings weren't only interested in raiding, they were motivated by commerce as well.
This is beautiful, this pot.
At the top are this series of 8 glass beads of various shapes and forms, some of them held in clasps with metal or silver fixings.
But there seems to be a variety of objects
Yes,
and of
yes,
different
yeah,
styles
yeah,
coming from
yeah.
different places, coming from France, Anglo-Saxon styles and Viking styles. So what's this object in here then, Richard?
We think that what you see between the gold braid is a glass vessel of some description, sitting within a very fine leather pouch with this extraordinary sumptuous silk, a Samite silk from the Far East or the Middle East. It's something very precious and very special, wrapped in something which was very, very exotic.
Eastern treasures like this remind us that there was more to the Vikings than simple raiding. By the 11th century, the Vikings' vast trading network stretched across Europe, beyond Constantinople, all the way to Baghdad. They were a trading superpower, which engaged with cultures right across the known world. But the Vikings weren't the first foreign power to colonise Britain. The Romans began their conquest centuries earlier, in 43 AD. The story of Rome's 400-year rule is well known. But what happened here after the Roman Empire fell is still a mystery.
The end of Roman rule in Britain saw us plunged into the Dark Ages, several obscure centuries for which there is little written record. And actually finding archaeological evidence from this period of time is relatively rare. But a team of archaeologists is hoping to strike it lucky with a new dig at an abandoned Roman military fort near Lancaster.
This is the famous Roman fort of Ribchester, where a team is digging for evidence to explain what happened in Britain after the Roman Empire fell, and to reveal if we really did slip into centuries of chaos, often thought of as the Dark Ages. They start by excavating the Roman road running through the fort and get their first intriguing clue.
Just cleaned off this Roman road surface, and we've just discovered that it's been robbed, which is really interesting.
The road appears to have been dismantled after the Roman occupation, with the heavier stones taken away.
There's a really nice insight into the operations of the fort pretty much after the Romans have left, because they're destroying the infrastructure of it to build buildings and taking that material away somewhere else.
So what were these Dark Age Britons building with this stone, and where? The team thinks they found the first clues at the other end of the fort.
Beginning of week 3, and we have large bits of tile, and that more intense orange is the robbed away hearth, and that orange burning element there suggests we've got sort of workshop activities taking place within that building.
The burnt orange earth suggests that this was the site of a fire, built after the Roman administration had collapsed. But this fire does seem to be on an industrial scale, making it possible evidence of manufacturing. And further excavation reveals what they may have been making.
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic piece of evidence. Really nice thing there. That is really good evidence that the manufacturing here involved glass. There's a little bit of a runoff of glass, probably from recycling old vessels and stuff like that. It's a really key find. Find of the week. Thank you very much.
We sometimes think of Dark Age Britain as extremely backward. But with this glass and the signs of an industrial fire, this dig could be revealing something very different. Britons converting an old Roman fort into workshops. It's new evidence for an era of enterprise, and further finds offer more clues to this new British post-Roman economy.
I've just found a coin. Oh, marvellous. So it is, so it's a tiny 3rd or 4th century Roman coin. Marvellous, there we go.
The team finds over 20 more coins, all from around the same workshop building. Now Duncan has brought these and his other finds into our lab. We're hoping that they can tell us how this fort was used after Roman rule collapsed, and shine a light on the truth about Britain in the Dark Ages.
Okay, so we found 22 coins when we were excavating there, in those very, very top surfaces. And so I think that this is the very, very end of the Roman use of the fort.
Can we have a look at some of these coins? I'll
Yeah,
bring this over so that we can see them a bit more clearly.
The head on that side is hardly visible, isn't it? It's almost smooth. Hardly visible, exactly. We're looking at a lot of wear and use that's going on as well.
But this is a Roman coin. Who's the emperor on that then?
Valentinian is the emperor on that one. So it's minted between 364 and 378.
But Duncan believes that these coins were deposited perhaps 2 centuries later. They're very heavily worn, suggesting that they may have been used long after Roman rule in Britain ended in 410.
And I think given that we've got all that wear, these coins were probably in circulation for quite a long time. Certainly after you see the collapse of sort of Roman administration, really, coins and pottery are no longer created in the same volumes or at all as they were previously. But the people who live in these forts and in these sort of Roman landscape places almost certainly remain there. So they continue to use quite a lot of this material culture. And certainly I think that, you know, we shouldn't be seeing this as an absolute cut-off point. We shouldn't be saying, you know, 410 AD, the Romans left. What is happening is part of a continuous decline or transformation is probably a better way of thinking about it, into something completely different.
Without military rule, post-Roman society in Britain would undoubtedly have been more dangerous. But this new evidence suggests that it may have been more sophisticated than we thought.
So the person who dropped this coin here, for example, what was he doing in the fort?
What we're seeing there is a whole series of different manufacturing activities. So we've got the glass that you can see there, we've got the weights, we've got coins for trade and exchange. We think we've got tanning pits, and we think we've got evidence of iron making as well.
But wouldn't you have expected those things to be present in a Roman fort as well?
Not necessarily, no. By the time you get into the 4th century, it becomes quite a dangerous place to be. If you're moving large numbers of goods and valuable things across the north of Britain, you're probably going to be attacked. There's probably lots of brigands around, that sort of stuff. So I suspect that as we start to see the breakdown of that administration, of the safety networks that exist, then you see that manufacturing to support the fort and starting to take place within it itself.
These finds show that we're wrong to think of the Dark Ages as a period of utter chaos and decline in Britain. Archaeology suggests that this was in fact a new age of resourcefulness, when Britons began their own trades and industries and built a new society. While England was being rebuilt after the Romans, in Scotland it was a different story. Here, the earliest line of Scottish kings was reaching the height of their power. But today, the full story of these northern rulers remains shrouded in mystery.
The Picts were the ancient people of Scotland, depicted by history as fearsome, painted warriors, feared even by the Romans.
While southern Britain fell to the armies from Rome, here in the north, the Picts were largely unconquered. They continued to rule across Scotland and into northern England, right up until the 10th century. But their story is little known.
Hard evidence of the Picts and their kingdom has been hard to find. Now, though, a team of archaeologists thinks they might just have pinpointed the seat of Pictish power. Here's their dig diary.
Some of the very few clues the Picts left behind are giant symbol stones. The most famous is the 6-foot-tall, terrifying-looking Rhynie man. These stones seem to be linked with Pictish royalty. Archaeologist Gordon Noble has spent his entire career searching for evidence of the Picts, and he's now digging at a site in the east of Scotland where some of their mysterious symbol stones have been found. He's hoping to unearth the seat of forgotten Pictish kings.
Right, here we are at Dunecair. This is the site where, in the 19th century, 6 Pictish symbol stones were found on top of the sea stack here. Only a few people have visited the site in the 20th century and didn't really note much on top. But already yesterday was our first ascent, which was quite precarious and slightly scary. We found remains on top.
It's a promising find, but to fully investigate it, they'll have to make the dangerous climb all over again. The stack is 60 feet tall, surrounded by jagged rocks, and the chilly North Atlantic. A strong defensive position for a Pictish warrior tribe, but not the easiest commute for a team of archaeologists. However, if they have found a Pictish fort, it will all have been worth it.
Right, so we're on top of the sea stack now, where the symbol stones were found. We're at the lower portion of what we think is the fortified site.
Following the trail of the symbol stones pays off immediately. The very first trial trench reveals an area of flat stones, possibly a hearth.
So it looks like evidence of actual occupation activities actually on top of the promontory here, so that's quite exciting. We've got lots of charcoal, we've got fragments of animal bone, so hopefully this will give a good evidence of how people were using the promontory in the past.
It's a promising start, and another trench provides evidence that this site may in fact have been a dwelling or even a fortress.
Okay, so we're in test pit 5 at the moment, so we've just opened this up and we've found a series of post holes. We've got one that's the fill's been excavated out, and then we've uncovered another 4 over here in a row. You can see them over here, and there's another possible one, half a one, sitting over in the corner out here. So this might be part of a building, we don't quite know yet, but we're taking samples from that one, so we'll wait and see what we've got for the rest.
A line of post holes suggests a wooden wall. And by day 4, the team has uncovered hard evidence of a substantial fortification.
So we've got some quite exciting results here. We've got remains of big slots here. These were for timber beams, and this one here projects all the way from the edge of the cliff up to this feature here, which is a giant, very large post hole here. So it looks like we've got both upright timber elements and horizontal timber elements, creating this big wall enclosing the sea stack here. So that's quite exciting and great detail really on the construction methods for this rampart here.
The team have found compelling evidence that this was once a fortified site. But to be sure that it belonged to the Picts, they'll have to radiocarbon date their finds.
That rock stack looked really difficult to access. Presumably it would have been connected to the mainland by a more significant causeway, perhaps.
We think so. We think it was probably a promontory in the Pictish period, which makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't want to build a fort on top of the stack today, certainly.
The dating came back with some staggering results. This sea fort does date to the time of the Picts, but incredibly, it's 200 years older than anyone expected.
Well, it's quite interesting. The dates for most Pictish forts fall into the 5th and 6th centuries AD, when they really seem to reach their height of construction and use. But this example here, we just got the radiocarbon dates back, and it's actually 3rd and 4th centuries AD, which is really interesting, so it's the earliest example that we have so far.
What's more, they think that this fort was just one of a string of coastal defences built by the Picts to defend their territory.
And we know that these defending enclosures were deeply implicated in kingship. So we perhaps have the first glimmers, really, of that process where we get the emergence of these early kingdoms in northern Britain.
So if this is the emergence of early Pictish kingdoms, what's that growing out of?
Smaller scale societies in the Iron Age, certainly, or certainly a shift towards more lineage-based models where we're getting certain individuals styling themselves as kings and really underlining their power by building these forts.
So they're growing into bigger political units, effectively?
Really, this period is the birth or the first evidence for these essentially what become the early medieval states of Northern Europe emerging. So it's a really, really important time period.
The discovery of Britain's earliest Pictish fort is huge, but it is not the seat of royal power Gordon was hoping for. So he's starting a new dig at Rhynie itself, whose place name comes from the Celtic word for king. This was where Rhynie Man once stood, and the site is still marked by other mysterious symbol stones.
These symbol stones date to the 5th and 6th centuries AD, and we have this contemporary complex of monuments and enclosures round about the standing stone here. The standing stone here, the cross stain, which hopefully you can see that there's a salmon here and a Pictish beast as well. Big long legs here and the snout here and this little mane on the top here.
The symbol stone marks the entrance to a huge circular enclosure. His hunch now is that the scale of this site shows it was far more significant than the fort at Dunecair.
So we're trying to uncover a bit more of this settlement this year, and so we've dug this very large trench, about 40 metres by 35 metres, to uncover more elements of the enclosure complex.
This new trench reveals the circular enclosure was defined by a deep outer ditch and a defensive timber wall or palisade.
Right, day 12 at Rhynie, a lovely summer's day. So we're down here looking at the palisade and post setting that defines the outer boundary of the fort here. So we're getting some really quite exciting architectural details down here, beginning to find evidence of actual planks and post settings here. And then just over to my right, over here, there's a whole line of post holes, and these seem to respect this outer enclosure here. So we've got a big wooden plank-based wall on the outside, and then big posts on the inside, perhaps creating a raised platform, a raised walkway round the edge of the fort right here.
Gordon's team has found evidence of a huge fort. It would have been 60 metres in diameter, and its defensive wall was complex. The team has found the remains of a second wall outside the first. It begins to look like Gordon's hunch has paid off. His team may have discovered a royal stronghold worthy of the first kings of Scotland.
The reason this big wooden wall is important is because we know that in this period Pictish kings are closely tied to these fortified sites, and that seems to be one of the underpinnings of their rulership. And we've had very few excavations of this scale to actually reveal this important architectural detail, and really the scale of the outer enclosure is really quite staggering at this relatively early phase in the 5th and 6th centuries AD.
The Pictish kings are Britain's most mysterious rulers. And now Gordon's team has pushed back the date of the rise of their power and discovered what may have been one of their primary strongholds. But incredibly, that's not all. Gordon has also discovered evidence here to show how the Pictish kings lived, and he's brought it back to our lab.
So who actually lived at a palace like this? I mean, a king, what kind of area would he have covered? Was it his family there? Would there have been an army there?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I'd call it a palace. I'd call it a kind of royal complex, really. Okay. It's clearly, perhaps, at certain times of the year, people lived there. We have buildings inside. But at the same time, we don't have any evidence for actual, grinding of grain or some of the more everyday tasks. I think this is more likely a place where kings are coming at certain times of the year and entertaining his followers.
Some of the finds reveal that this entertaining was done in a lavish style, using imported luxuries.
So these things don't look like much. They look like, bits of toffee or something. But this is incredibly rare pottery in Britain and Ireland in this time period.
So where's it actually from?
We don't know exactly, but somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. And these would have been big storage amphora of the 6th century AD or late 5th century. They're probably for storing wine or some other exotic foodstuff.
Do you think by the time they got to Scotland they still had wine in there?
I hope so. I can't imagine why else they would come so far. So these are the northernmost examples found in Britain and Ireland so far. And they're coming really far inland.
So the Pictish kings of Rhynie getting a bit of a taste for the luxuries of the Mediterranean.
That's right, yes. It's amazing to think, really, that Pictish high-status people were sitting in Rhynie drinking Mediterranean wine in the 6th century. It's quite a fantastic image, really, isn't it?
There was more going on at Rhynie than just fine dining. The team also found signs of a ritual offering of cattle bones and teeth buried in a pit right underneath the spot where Gordon believes Rhynie man himself once stood. It's another clue to the ritual significance of the fort.
It's not the most defensible location. Most forts in this time period are on promontories or on hills. So this is a more lowland location. And what we think we've got here is that it's using the language of defence, but actually there's perhaps more going on here. So the Rhynie man, for example, carries this axe, and it's thought to be a sacrificial axe for poleaxing cattle. So we think there's probably cult dimensions to the site, as well as being perhaps a residence at certain times of the year.
The team is delving into the mysteries of the Picts, and they've revealed what appears to have been a very early royal site, 2 centuries older than anyone expected to find. Here perhaps was the seat of Pictish power, a royal court with luxuries from the Mediterranean. For Gordon, it's a satisfying conclusion to his year-long search for the Picts. In archaeology, some fantastic discoveries come only after years of painstaking research. Others are made by chance and often against the clock.
Before any major construction project gets underway, the developers must first call in the archaeologists to survey the site and to save any archaeology it might contain. Commercial digs like this often turn up surprising and exciting finds, as our next dig diary shows, when archaeologists uncovered evidence of one of the most intriguing Iron Age cultures in Britain.
November 2014, in a small Yorkshire village, and a team is beginning a dig to rescue the archaeology from a site where a housing estate is planned. Time is tight. The excavation needs to be completed so construction can get underway. But within days, it's clear there's more to this site than anyone had predicted. When the archaeologists begin to unearth an array of 2,000-year-old burial mounds, known as barrows.
Right, it's John's. Very exciting 3 barrows now. John, would you mind coming to describe your burial, please?
We've got a crouch burial lying on its left side, facing east, with the head to the north.
So you've still got quite a lot to do
yeah,
here.
well, that's six burials in this one barrow alone. There's two that Matt's got that are just north. There's one definite grave in there, and then I see some black patches that are still to be explored. Tons to do.
Brilliant.
More and more graves are unearthed, until it's clear that the site for the new housing estate is actually a large Iron Age cemetery. And it's such an incredibly rare find, the developers agree to give the archaeologists more time.
We're going to start stripping this area this afternoon, which we hope to see an extension of the Square Barrow Cemetery. Obviously there's great anticipation because we still have no idea what's under here.
As burial after burial is revealed, the team realise that until now, their excavations only scratched the surface of this extraordinary site.
Oh, looking good. Extremely good.
For months, the team works against the clock, until by day 149, they have revealed a staggering 38 square barrows.
Within the cemetery, we have all shapes and sizes of square barrows. This one's the classic representation, 8 metres by 6 metres, with a central grave. We've got a much smaller one here, but still with a central grave.
Barrow graves like these are usually associated with high-status individuals, like this man, who has been carefully laid out with his shield.
Yes. It looks absolutely fantastic.
If we're right in saying that this is a shield, then that's pretty special.
Yeah.
And it's one for Pete to tick off his list.
Yeah. We came here 8 months ago anticipating a couple of square barrows, but in fact we've actually got an Iron Age square barrow cemetery. We've excavated over 60 barrows and 101 skeletons to date.
This vast cemetery was a chance find, made because of a housing development. But who were the mysterious Iron Age tribe buried here? Only now can the analysis begin, with the skeleton of a 25-year-old man, buried with an array of weapons.
He dates to the Iron Age. He's obviously significant within his community. It's highly likely that he was a warrior, that he was afforded more ritual than the other burials that we're seeing. He's a significant member of his community.
And is this the only sword you've got on site?
Yes.
Then?
Yeah, this is the only example. We've got other objects that have been found within the barrows, but that's the only sword that we've got. We've got an iron blade with a scabbard still adhering to it, made of timber, and then the horn handle.
And these little bits of bronze as well?
Yes.
Here and here? Yeah. So quite decorative up the top.
It would have been really decorative, yes.
The fine craftsmanship hints at a sword that once belonged to someone of high status. And the spearheads found beside the body offer further insights into the burial afforded to this high-ranking man.
Along with the sword, the person had been buried with several spears that you can see around his body, and they hadn't been placed, they're just randomly positioned within the grave.
Do you imagine people throwing them into the grave then?
That's what we thought. As part of his ritual, that they stood at the top of the grave and that they were placing these spears within the grave.
This cemetery is in Yorkshire, but the style of the burials, the contents of the graves, and the design of this sword are distinctly continental. It's a mysterious phenomenon known as Arras culture and unique in Britain to East Yorkshire. York Museum holds an extraordinary collection of Arras treasures, showing cultural connections with France. And they reveal that these Iron Age people venerated not just their warrior men, but more remarkably, their women.
These beads are utterly astonishing, aren't they? They're beautiful.
They're one of my favourite objects in these cemeteries. And the wonderful thing about this necklace, which was found in a fairly elderly woman's barrow, we think, is that it's composed of lots of different types of beads. These are eye beads, and cross-culturally we know that's quite a powerful symbol to ward off evil. But these beads come from a different necklace. These are wave beads, again from another necklace. These eye beads have been made in a completely different way to these ones.
So this perhaps suggests that they weren't all made at the same time specifically to make this necklace then?
No, I think they've come from a range of different necklaces, and perhaps as a woman, as you enter your more senior years of life, you inherit these beads through mothers and grandmothers, perhaps as you come through things like the major rites of passage like childbirth and survive it, which not all women did. And this is something that you wear as a senior female figure in that community that speaks of those connections with your maternal forebears. So I think that's an extraordinary object that speaks of that biography of your connections and the families of which you're a part.
And how does the Aras culture specifically fit within what's going on around it? I mean, does it fit within the rest of the Iron Age culture in the area?
It's peculiar because there are very few other people who formally bury their dead at this time. So the phenomenon of the square barrow cemeteries is really quite unique. It has connections with the continent. That's where you might expect to see that kind of barrow. And so it's possible that that idea is being brought over by somebody important or powerful. So for all intents and purposes, our locals are at least first or second generation incomers.
The discovery of the Aras cemetery was unexpected and extraordinary. It offers us tantalising evidence of our links to the continent in the Iron Age and to a possible mysterious tribe of ancient immigrants who came from Europe to settle in the heart of Yorkshire 2,000 years ago. From Aras to Star Car, archaeology can reveal how our ancestors lived and what they thought. While from Scottish kings who built a new kingdom to Dark Age Britons who built a new way of life, it can illuminate worlds we never thought we could know. To reveal the ancient people with new ideas who laid the foundations for our modern Britain.